Hi guys, welcome to the latest Trinity Tim's podcast. Joined here by my usual two colleagues, Eric Knott from Reed Celtic and Joe McHugh from Video Celts, but we've got a special guest tonight, Russell Boyce from the Boycey Bus is here.
Hey,
welcome, Russell.
Nice to be on.
We had a guest or two on, and Russell's show is excellent for everyone who's not listened to it. You all should be listening to it. And we think that he will make an excellent contribution to tonight's discussion. And boy, oh boy, have we got a lot of things to discuss tonight. We're going to go to Kairat first before we go into the deeper sort of issues that the club is facing right now. I think it's obvious that we've got a big task ahead of us tomorrow, a big task. I'm going to sound an optimistic tone here and say that I think we'll go through because Rodgers knows his business too well. The players and the manager might have been caught a little cold by how they played at Celtic Park, but on their own home ground, they're going to have to attack us a bit, and that plays into our hands to an extent. Rodgers has also framed this as a must-win game, and so the stakes could not be higher, and the players know it, and he knows it, and the coaching staff knows it, and that's why I expect us to win. But the home performance is really shaking the supporters up a bit. It's really caused a lot of stress and anxiety. And it was the worst kind of stress and anxiety because I think we all said before the game kicked off that we probably would have liked to go into this leg with a 2 or 3 goal lead, probably even more than that. And we're going in on a 0-0 draw. So it's pretty, it's a pretty hard situation we've put ourselves in. Eric, what did you think of the game itself?
Well, I mean, I suppose the first thing that I could say is that nothing that happened in that game surprised me. We've been warning for a very long time that something like this was coming. We've been warning that complacency was going to cause us to have a result like that. And I think when the game was in and around the 15th minute, you just got that feeling. You just had that feeling that it was going to be one of those nights because nothing seemed to be working. There was no penetration. I very much, and I wrote about this afterwards, I had the feeling that the manager, the Kairat manager, Raphael Urzbaktin, or whatever his name is, that he had studied how Scottish Premiership sides set up against us. He studied it closely because it's obvious in the latter half of last season that a lot of Scottish Premiership sides knew how to frustrate the living shit out of us by the way they set up, and it was very hard for us to break them down. So it very much, to all intents and purposes, I felt it was very much reminiscent of the St. Mirren performance, the way St. Mirren set up against us in the first game of the season. And we really struggled to break them down. And it was a deflection in the end from Luke McCowan that got us a goal in that game. The simple fact is that against Kairat, we really, really struggled to break them down. And we couldn't break them down. And they did look dangerous on the break. So it was like, I have to give credit to Kairat and the way they set up. And I mean, their ranking as a side, as I did an article on it afterwards, and their ranking puts them about the same level as Derry City in the Irish League, in our National League in Ireland. And for them to come to Celtic Park, into that atmosphere, to stifle us, there's credit due to them. But then you look at the flip side of that, we should never, ever have been in that position. We should never have been put into that position. Brendan Rodgers should not have had to face into that game with little to no signings that would make an impact in a game like that. I mean, okay, fair enough, we had Kieran Tierney and we had Ben Negrein. But outside of that, there was nobody that had been brought in the transfer window that could really make an impact. And the front line is the issue, obviously. And we saw the difference. I know, obviously, we had a massively changed squad against Livingston on Saturday, but we saw the difference of playing Ben Negrein in a more forward role. And I think after the way he played on Saturday, I think he's more useful in that role than he is. He was actually more effective. He got 2 great goals. So, but as to the result itself, that was coming a mile off. I think every single one of us had a bad feeling about it. Now, I never thought we'd lose the game. I know we were trying to be optimistic in the last pod, and we all gave a scoreline of 4 clear goals, and we thought that it could have been that way. I was saying we had to win by 3 before we went out there to make ourselves comfortable. It's not comfortable. That's the simple fact. These guys are going to be at home in front of a partisan crowd. We have to travel a long way to get there. And yes, I know Kairat had to do the same to get to play us. But the reality is, it's on a knife edge. But I do believe, like you, James, that Rodgers has the potential to go out there, and he'll have his team well drilled. Obviously, he'll have studied the way that Kairat set up, and he will be thinking of ways that he can, get around that. And I'd be confident we can go out there and, get a result. Will we not concede? I don't know about that. It might be a close one, might be 2-1. But bottom line is we should never be in this position. We should never be in this position. And that position is only down to the Celtic board. Nobody else. There is nobody else at fault for this. There's nobody else that has caused this situation other than them. And it was high time that Sack the Board was sung from the stands. And it was long overdue. And I was delighted when I heard it on last Wednesday evening. Absolutely delighted. And I want those voices to just get louder and louder as this season progresses. That's the reality. So that's my view on it.
I mean, yes, you're right. All of us had a bad feeling about it. I mean, we've all watched the league games, and we've all had this sort of feeling of dread that we didn't have the firepower that we used to have. That we haven't lost Kyogo, having lost Jota, having lost Kuhn, that the manager style of play can't properly be implemented by this existing team. And this is why Rodgers has literally spent weeks begging them to get the right players in place for this. Because Rodgers knows that the team can't play his style of football with the current personnel. And it's such a failing on every level. Rodgers is saying that he has not done enough to convince these guys of what they need to do. Right? But I don't think anybody could convince them of what they need to do. They're impervious to fact, they're impervious to logic. They've just got this idea in their heads that they're geniuses at this and that they know what they're doing. And it's ludicrous. And the guy who actually knows what he's doing, the guy who's at the sharp end, the guy who's got to build the team and build the tactics, knows that the team cannot functionally do what he needs it to do. And he's been saying it. And that's why I was absolutely dreading the game, dreading it. And the reason I think that we will win anyway is that Rodgers knows enough that he's got to tweak the system a bit, that he's got to get the team playing a slightly different style. And with a slightly different style, we've got the better personnel that we should still go through. But Jesus, man, it's made it hard. He's made it very hard. Joe, what about yourself? What are you thinking?
Tomorrow is 50-50. Celtic are not the favourites. We've handed over a lot of initiative. So I don't share your confidence or Eric's confidence. We are well capable of winning the game 2-0. We could win the game quite comfortably. But equally, we are short up front. There's not been one good forward performance this season. So there's very little to be confident. The main reason to be confident is Brendan Rodgers. But he's been battling against it. I mean, the top of the team, 22nd of January was when they beat Young Boys Bern. Kyogo was in Rennes the next day. 4th of July, first pre-season game of the season against Queen's Park. Earlier that day, I think it had been announced that terms had been agreed with Como for Nicholas Kuhn. Rodgers confirmed that and says, the good thing of this is it gives us plenty of time to bring in replacements. So, so he's maybe a bit green, a little bit naive, but it's quite clear that the board are out to screw him, make life as difficult as possible, and it's win-win for them. If Celtic qualify, fantastic, job well done, lads. If Celtic don't qualify, that's on Brendan Rodgers, and we were right not to withhold the money after all the messengers were sent out to tell everybody that Trusty, Ida and Engels were a complete waste of money. So it's a horrible position to be in. Our main hope is that Brendan Rodgers, force of personality, gets it over with. But we don't know. We've no idea about who's going to play up front. Is Maeda playing in the left? Is he going to play through the middle? Is Forrest playing? Is Yang going to play up front? Is Yang going to play right? Is Yang going to play left? I keep thinking back to Ange's second season when we had 4 really on-fire wingers Maeda and Jota on the left, Abada and Forrest on the right, and now we're toiling to get one winger named. So I am hopeful, but I certainly wouldn't suggest anyone going anywhere near a bookies. I think last week we were all saying 4 because I was a little bit of hope and that it might all click in the night. Yeah. The way it had done against Slovan Bratislava, and it'll be all right in the night. But it was grim watching last week. The first half was a waste of time. The second half was slightly better, but and we're missing out. Alistair Johnson's injury midway through the first half.
Yeah.
Tony Ralston is a damn good backup, and I really dislike the treatment he gets and the condescending comments about the bricky and all this. Ho ho ho! He's as good a backup right back as you're going to get. As we're finding out, struggling to find a backup left back. So if Carter,
there's a great cross on him too.
Yep. If Carter, Vickers, if Tierney or Maeda do their hamstring halfway through the first half tomorrow, we're in real trouble. So let's see. It's slightly more than half full, but it could be drained tomorrow. But let's get the thought from the Boise bus.
Yeah.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think you're absolutely right. The faith that we've got in it comes down to the manager. That's where you can put that, positive slant on it. And the reason that you don't have faith in the other side of the coin, who could have influenced the outcomes of these playoffs, which is obviously the board, is because their actual record at qualifying for the Champions League, when there's qualifiers involved, is abysmal. I think I'm right in saying this would be, if we weren't to qualify, this would be our 5th in a row of qualifiers involved that we've not made it. That would be astonishing that you would back these guys' strategy. We did some very basic chimney sums on the bus a few weeks ago in one of our episodes, right? And basically what it worked out as, roughly, and it's a good headline, I said basically the money they've got that they get lauded for as cash reserves in the bank right now, let's say it's 100 million, they've missed out on failed Champions League qualifications during their tenure, more than double that amount. So is that looking like success or failure? And anyone who wants to think that this board have a handle on what it takes to get Celtic as ready as possible and as tooled up as possible for a Champions League qualifier is wrong, because the facts tell you Celtic struggle qualifying for the Champions League when there's playoff rounds or even sometimes earlier legs required to get results over teams that we should be beating. Under this regime, we don't do qualification for the Champions League very well. It's astounding to me, though, and this is what it does really come back to for me, is we were always told that we budget for a Europa League campaign, and if we get Champions League, it's the bonus. I don't understand how that narrative can't shift, or that theory, if it were to be true. I didn't believe it at the time, I don't believe it now, but let's run with it. If it is the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how that doesn't alter when you've had 3 years of group stage football in a row in the Champions League and what's came with that. Because that would be utterly bizarre if we are still going back to, because Champions League's not guaranteed, we budget for Europa League. I don't think there's any other club who's had 3 years group stage football that could be ranked 218th highest spenders in Europe right now after 3 years of group stage football in the world's Premier Club competition. One of the things I always say is, and I've felt this for a long time, I don't want to ramble on too long, Celtic don't treat the Champions League with the respect it deserves to be treated. And if you don't want to respect the tournament that gets all the big clubs absolutely tuned in, the one tournament the affects whether players want to join your club and doesn't want to join your club, whether that be in the top 5 leagues or certainly when it comes to us, it's a huge bargaining tool. That tournament is only disrespected by us. We don't seem to value the effort that's required to make sure the outcome becomes a wee bit more certain in our favour to qualify for it. And I find that really, really frustrating. And especially when you've had the gift of 3 years group stage football, I just feel like, what is it going to take then for the attitude to flip to being a wee bit more ambitious? Because that's a hell of a lot of money banked. It's a hell of a lot of exposure that we've had in that. And by the way, funnily enough, even in the park, there was progress made last year for the first time in Europe in a while. And even that, so all these different traits, the money, the progress of the team, the profile raising, probably maintaining good deals with Adidas and Alphabet thanks to these campaigns in Europe. None of these seem, though, still to be enough for the Celtic board to realise the importance, the value, and as I'll go back to, the respect this tournament needs. And that doesn't mean just at the group stage. That means the respect it needs to navigate the qualifiers. And with their record in it, I'm astounded they haven't found a way to build up that respect, because if I was getting beat at something all the time, the one thing you could always say is you've got respect for your opponent. We don't seem to show the Champions League the respect I think it deserves, and I think that's what's came as a cropper.
Can I make one point, James?
Yeah, you got it.
First and foremost, if we do qualify tomorrow, we, at this point in time, have to ask the question, what benefit is it to us in any way? Because they will not use the finance that we get from qualification and put that back into the squad. Now, secondly, I did an article the other day, I made a point, right, where when we decided, after we had secured the 40 million in finance of last season's Champions League, we then decided that we desperately needed another 10 million from the sale of Kyogo Furuhashi. In amongst all that, right? And I just posited what would happen if they had just waited to sell Kyogo Furuhashi and just held on till the end of the season. We could have gone to Aston Villa and got a result. We could have therefore got ourselves an easier draw, and then we could have got into the last 32. We could then have, as a result of getting the easier draw, have progressed to the last 16, in which case we would have secured 11 million in finance, more than what we got for Kyogo Furuhashi, right? And that, to me, reflects a board that has no strategy. They have no strategic thought whatsoever. And the thing about it is, yes, fair enough, Kyogo Furuhashi was 30 years old, but if he had stayed with us till the end of the season, the simple fact is we still probably would have got 10 million off him if he'd had a good season for the club and he'd scored plenty of goals. We still probably would have landed that 10 million quid anyway. So if the board had strategically thought that through, there was probably a good chance that we would have ended up with more finance and a better standing in the Champions League than we did this time around. But as you've highlighted, James, time out of number, they chucked it. They chucked it as soon as that game against Young Boys Byrne, the final whistle blew in that game, they chucked it and they sold Kyogo Furuhashi. So there just is no strategic planning at this board with this board at the moment. They don't think ahead. They don't have a plan. And that's a perfect example of it there. And also what Boise is saying as well, 100%, like the amount of qualifiers that we have gone through and missed out on qualification for the Champions League is astounding. And the amount of finance that has been lost as a result of not preparing and not being ready for it. And we are exactly back in that same situation right now, which proves 100% what Boise said. 100%. If we do not prepare for these Champions League qualifiers, we are going to struggle. And we are now in a situation where we're struggling. It's that simple.
Eric, they put in the work to get Kyogo sold ahead of the Young Boys game. Everything was in place. Within an hour,
they planned for that.
The team was doing a lap of honour and it was all getting signed off. Genuinely, within an hour of the final whistle, various outlets in France had that as a done deal and Kyogo was over the next day. So they'd done their work. They were delighted to see that goal go in. That own goal allowed them to get on with selling Kyogo. It was dependent on that. If that game had finished nothing each, Kyogo would probably still been with us for the Aston Villa game. So that's the risk they take. But they're happier in the Europa League. The Europa League's quite comfortable. It's not so demanding. If you're in the Champions League, you've really got to work at your best. You've got to be very efficient. You've got to be punching above your weight. But that's just, it's too much like hard work. That might get the entitled peasants thinking that we're a Champions League side, whereas they'd rather think of us as being a Europa League side. But sorry for jumping in.
No, but it goes back to what Boise said. We don't respect the Champions League, and that was the perfect example of it. And there's some of the commenters there are saying, "Oh yeah, but Kyogo wanted away. Fine, he wanted away. Let him tell him he can go at the end of the season." But again, look, it's all hindsight
Eric,
is a version of foresight.
You said something really important, mate, that you don't see any real point in us qualifying tomorrow because we won't utilise the extra resources that we get. It's funny because my mate Johnny said this to me on the sports bus on the way back for the game. He said maybe a year in the Europa League would do us good. and what's the worst that could happen? And I said, well, from the point of view of this board of directors, they will probably sell another key player just to make up the shortfall. And that's the worst that could happen. That's probably what they'll do. To me, that's what the importance of going through them all is. It's not even about whether or not we use the money to strengthen the team. It's how much weaker the team gets if we don't go through. Because I'm totally like you. I don't see that there's any way that the extra money will be used in the way we would want it to be. I just don't want further damage getting done. And that's what the inevitable consequence of going through would be.
See, when you said there as well, just so I don't forget this point, because I'll probably forget it and I'll not make it right. But see, when you were saying about the Nicholas Kuhn sale in particular, I think that one again speaks to the contradictions of this board. So like I was, if Peter Lawwell's in situ at the football club, but he doesn't do anything, but he gets wage rises for doing nothing, that's a contradiction in terms. If we can't get the players of the bracket we're apparently looking for to enhance the first team until their parent club sees out their navigation to whatever European competition it is they're aspiring to qualify for, how come we don't adopt that same attitude? Because if that is the run-of-the-mill take, that, well, you can't buy players because the parent club right now is waiting to see if they make Champions League or not. When did we ever negotiate that aspect to Como when it came to the sale of Nicholas Kuhn? Why didn't we say, hey, by the way, hang on, we've got qualifiers to deal with right now. Hey, as you know, Como, it's difficult to get players of that bracket in right now when there's qualifiers about. It's amazing how these obstacles seem to only be from the buy-in side, and yet when it comes to the sales side, it seems to be open for business, door wide open, regardless of the exact same excuses we use for not being able to purchase. We don't seem to put up the same argument when it comes to selling. Sorry to jump in. I knew I'd forget to say that, so I just thought I'd dive in with that one.
No, you're 100% right, mate, because that is a contradiction. And Sutton said this the other day. If this is going to be your argument that we're waiting on players making up their minds, I've got two things to say on that. First, Sutton is right. You could have said to Nicholas Kuhn, we will let you leave. We have no problem with you leaving, but wait until we've qualified for the Champions League first, and then you can go. Or until we don't qualify, and then you can go. He would have waited a couple of months. He would have waited a month and played his final games, took his bow in front of Celtic Park, having possibly scored goals that get us through, and left a hero in everybody's good graces. And I'm sure he would have done that as a professional. Kyogo would have waited an extra game before he left. We didn't have to sell him straight away as soon as the full-time whistle blew that night. But here's the other part of that argument, that players don't want to come here until the issue is decided. Well, I would suggest that they are the wrong players. The players who don't want to make that decision come sign for Celtic until they know we're in the Champions League are the wrong players to be looking at. Or the board just does a really bad job of selling this to them. Because if it was me talking to those players, my line would be, well, we want to get there. We're going to get there. But you could be the guy that scores the goals that gets us there. Do you not have confidence in us as a club and as yourself and a player to come and help us get there? We want to wait an extra 2 months for. I mean, it's ludicrous and it's absolute nonsense. The whole argument behind it is nonsense. The whole argument about why we have to wait this long is nonsense. It's a choice. The big guy that we're going to sign from Antwerp, right? That deal's just about done. We're in between the two games that we need to qualify. So the argument that he was waiting until after this is completely rendered redundant. So the question becomes, why wasn't he signed in time to play last week? What was the delay? What was the reason for the delay? None of it makes a bit of sense, but as I've said, it doesn't have to make sense. We live in a world that doesn't make much sense. So these people not making sense is just something we accept, I think, is the natural state of affairs. That is kind of...
Question, James. Do you believe that explanation?
Well, it's kind of...
I think it's bullshit. I think the board are bullshitting us all the time.
How much longer is this going to go on? If we ignore this and we keep ignoring it, we're going to be back here every single summer with the same record on repeat. And we know that because we've been here every summer just about with the same record on repeat. Rodgers has been saying this for the last 2 summers. Ange was saying it before him. And I know there's people that will pretend that Ange never said anything of the sort, but the words are there and they're on the record and he wasn't happy with the speed this club takes to get things done. Before him, Ronnie had his own issues. Lennon had issues before that. Strachan and O'Neill both had issues with it. I mean, and Boyce, your thing about 5 qualifications in a row, and one of the stats that somebody else put up in the comments about
18.
How many times we failed, right? I mean,
11
this
failures.
isn't about one manager. This is a pattern that goes all the way back through all the different coaches and all the different setups. And the only constants are those people sitting in the board of directors. That's the only constants. Failing to prepare again and again and again and again, which is something is said, and as we've said, you're only preparing to fail. And that's actually, oddly enough, why I'm a bit optimistic this time. I think this is the last summer of this garbage that we're going to have to put up with. Because we do have a new generation of fans, and I have called them spoiled, and I've called them all sorts of things in the past because of the way they turn on certain players, and they're very impatient and all that. But I actually now understand those guys better than I did a few months ago. Those guys are ambitious for our future, and they want to see this club be everything that this club can be. And we don't have people at the top of this club who serve that need and serve that passion. And that's why I don't think we should be talking about a revolution, but a renewal. And Celtic needs to be renewed. And if the people who are running our club right now think they're the people to do it, then fine. But they're going to have to show us how they're going to do it, and they're going to have to tell us how they're going to do it, which means putting in front of us a plan for the next 5 years and 10 years. These are all smart people. They should be able to do that. We're not asking for a lot here. This is not a massive demand. We're not asking for miracles. Rodgers produces on the pitch. He's the miracle worker. So all we are asking these guys today is deliver off of it what he does on it. Michael Nicholson has been CEO, not acting CEO, because I'm not going to count that. I'm not going to count the time the guy spent with his training wheels on. He was made acting CEO 1,341 days ago. In that time, he has not said a word to us as supporters. He has not articulated a plan. So I think it is fair that this generation of fans, the generation that's grown up right now, who's seen Celtic win everything and wants Celtic to take that next step, I don't think it's unreasonable for them to suggest that it's time that Nicholson and the board produced a strategic overview and told us what the future looks like, what their future as supporters is going to look like. And I'm not just talking about the team on the park. I'm talking about the stadium that we play in. I'm talking about the infrastructure. I'm talking about fan engagement, the whole bit. And if these people don't have a plan like that sitting in a drawer somewhere, I think it's our responsibility as supporters and as fan media in particular to put a firm deadline on them for when we want to see one. Now, I'm not going to make that demand tonight, but I don't think it's an unreasonable suggestion. If they don't have a plan like that sitting in a drawer, then they are derelict in their duty to an extent that's almost unbelievable. And if they do have it sitting in a drawer, then let's see it. We're entitled to see it. Well, as shareholders, we're entitled to see it because a lot of us are shareholders as well as supporters. And the reason I'm optimistic is because the booing and the calls for the board to GTF the other night show that that generation of supporters is not going to tolerate this stuff any longer. So this club will be renewed whether they like it or not. They can play a role in it. And I'm perfectly happy for them to play a role in it as long as they present a plan, as long as they tell us how they're going to do it and on which time frame they're going to do it. And if they can do that, then great. If they can't do it, then they are going to have to move over for the people who can, because that is how modern institutions work. That's how this football club should work. It's how this football club has to work. But these guys are out of alibis. They are out of time. They are out of excuses. When they sold Kyogo in January and then couldn't replace them and still haven't replaced them up until now, their mandate is gone. When they undermine the manager deliberately, their mandate is gone. They can show us that they're about something or off they go. It will happen with or without them. But it will happen. Eric.
No, I agree 100%. I mean, I suppose if we play tomorrow night, and I'm not going to be trying to put a portent of doom on this, but if we do by chance lose tomorrow evening, they have serious questions to answer. Serious questions to answer, because this is a repeat. as we keep seeing the stat coming up in the comments there, 18 qualifiers we've played, 11 we've lost. That is a shit return. And if we end up playing tomorrow night and losing and going out against a team that is ranked similarly to Derry City, and this board presided over that, then, as you said, their mandate's gone. They're a busted flush. They've proven time out of number that they are not fit for purpose. And that's the reality. And the fans do have a voice. Everybody seems to have this, this impression that we can say what we want. It's not going to shift them, because they're permanently entrenched within the club and we can't get rid of them. Maybe that's the deal. Maybe that's the case. Maybe we can't get rid of them. But the fact of the matter is, we can make life as uncomfortable as possible for them at every game. And if we have the worst case, this week is a critical week for us. If we have a worst case scenario in this week where we don't qualify tomorrow night, and then we go to Ibrox by some miracle, because I would say that's some miracle now because of the way they're playing, that we lose at Ibrox, then those guys are going to be under savage pressure from the fan base. The banners that the Green Brigade put up on Saturday, while they were small and they didn't, there wasn't this big, huge banner put up or anything like that, it still got the point across. A basic board. That's what they are. They're a basic board. Very basic. I don't even know if you could call them basic, because something basic is actually functional. This board doesn't communicate. It doesn't tell us, as you said, what the plan is. And as you said, if they have a plan inside in a drawer, although I'm sure Peter Law was too stingy to pay for a filing cabinet to even have a drawer, but if they have a plan inside in a drawer, they need to pull it out. They need to let the fans know what it is. And Joe, you're going to have your say at the AGM. Ask them what the plan is. I think that should be one of the most first and foremost questions. What is the plan for the future of this club? Structurally, on the field, youth level, all those things. What's your plan? Tell us what your plan is. You're the guys running the show. You're the guys who should know. You're the guys who should have the plan. That's what you, Michael Nicholson, are paid £1 million fucking quid for. And Peter Law, well, you're getting 120 grand to hand out tea and biscuits. So you said you get what you pay for. Fucking give us what we paid for. Otherwise, fuck off. And I can't put it any clearer than that. But that's the message that needs to be got across to these guys. And excuse my language, but I'm past the point of sugarcoating shit now, because it's got to that point where it's ridiculous. And if tomorrow night turns out to be another qualification disaster, it's on them 100%. And if we somehow manage to go to Ibrox and lose, it's on them 100%, because they've tied one hand behind the manager's back and they put him in this position. And any person out there who's trying to blame Brendan Rodgers in any way, shape, or form for this is absolutely delusional. So yeah,
well,
that's my
Dave
take.
seems to want to defend the board, but doing it, he has asked a couple of meaningful questions. Believe it or not, he's asked why this generation of fans will be any different than other generations. Why they'll be listened to. They will be listened to, because they will make their position a lot clearer than our generation of fans will. And the reason for that is that and I don't want to be in a downer in my generation of supporters, right? But we grew up with Rangers winning 9 in a row. And there's a lot of my generation of fans who are actually very grateful to this board of directors, not just for pulling us ahead of them, but keeping us ahead of them. Now, my take on that is that there's nothing to stay ahead of. First, the club that won that 9 in a row died and went out of business in 2012, and that's why I always separate time into two different strands when I'm writing about them. Before 2012 and after 2012. And after 2012, I won't even call them that in the articles, because it's not who they are, and it's not an accurate representation of what actually happened. But there's a generation of fans, my generation, my dad's generation, who do believe that this is a well-run club and do believe that staying ahead of them is the be-all and end-all. This generation of supporters, the current generation, they have seen Celtic win everything domestically and dominate this lot until they really are an irrelevance for these guys. These guys want to see progress made in Europe. They want to come to a modern stadium with modern facilities. They want a Celtic museum, maybe even a Celtic hotel, the whole lot, the whole bit. They think that we should be a modern progressive club on the model that we're always told that we want to follow, that we have all these ambitions as a club, and we have, you know, what is it Nicholson said, world class in every aspect. Well, I mean, come on. Even the most basic board defender can see that we are miles from that standard. We're miles from it. We're nowhere even remotely near it. And they've stopped even trying to achieve it. And it's not that these are bad people. I keep on saying this. These are not bad men. These are not people who wish Celtic ill. They are, by the way, they are conspiring to make life hard for the manager right now. And they are, by default and by definition of that, sabotaging the manager and thus the club. But they are not bad people. They are just woefully out of step with what this club needs in the modern context. Woefully out of step. They don't know how to get us there. And and maybe the great tragedy that they've presided over this period, which they think is all about success, and that there's a generation of fans who want more and thinks that we deserve more. And they're right, they do. We do. We do want more. We do deserve more. And that is the difference. This generation of fans won't let them away with that. They won't let them continue to stagnate and continue to the point where we are looking up the table at a financially doped Ibrox club, which is falling over its own feet. It's not going to happen on these. This generation won't tolerate that. And they will do whatever it takes to save this club from its leadership, if it comes to that. But it doesn't have to come to that. These people can put in place a plan, and not just a plan, but a planned transition from where we are now to where we are going to be. And that, unfortunately, for them, will involve them moving on as the plan evolves and as the club evolves. Because you can only be in a certain position for a certain length of time before you run out of ideas about what you want to do and how you want to take things forward. If you're like Lol, who's been on the board for well over 20 years now, the idea that you have an original thought in your head is preposterous. And we all know this is true. The difference is that my generation of fans will accept it and the next generation won't. And that's why there will be a renewal of Celtic. It will happen. It's not a case of us making demands that it will happen. It will happen. It's a natural evolution. For a start, most of the guys on our board are too old to be hanging around doing that job for much longer. And it's natural that they will step aside at some point. But let's do it in a dignified, sensible fashion that moves the club forward at the same time. Joe.
I admire your optimism because
it's no optimism, it's realism. This is how things work. This is how things evolve. It's a natural process.
Yes, right. Well, the real realism that I live in is there's 1 hour of accountability a year at the AGM. The only thing that matters to them is repeating exactly what they did last year and staying above their old firm business partners. They don't need a plan. There might be some lively young supporters, but the majority of Celtic season ticket holders have probably been season ticket holders for 15 to 20 years. You don't need to look too far to see the age profile, and that's not a. I mean, I mind seeing a. I think it was a Turkish team playing Man United last season in the Champions League, or the season before, because Man United were in Europa League, and it was a young, angry crowd, and what a racket they made. Celtic Park doesn't have that, so I see there's a guy putting himself forward to be elected onto the Celtic Trust, but I don't see where the angry young folk that are going to force change. The board, I mean, I think 2 or 3 years ago, Nicholson was asked about the main stand, and he says, "Oh, we looked into it. It would cost £100 million. So we're doing nothing." So the main stand continues to fall into disrepair. The rest of the stadium is falling into disrepair. When they moan about spending big money in players and not being able to sell them for profits, they could also moan about Barrafield. Barrafield, it's gone very, very quiet. Last we heard from the club, it was due to open in November 2024. We're well into the 25-26 season and not a peep from the club about it. So they can't manage things. We had a good laugh about the Chinese steel getting lost in transit going to Ibrox last year. But Barrafield remains unopened, and that'll probably convince the board that it'd be bonkers to try and build a new stand or trying to upgrade things. So, as I say, I admire your optimism, but I don't see any mechanism unless this guy and the Celtic supporters trust can come in and shake things up. We need some younger, angry men like originally the Save Our Celts and then the Celts for Change. If there's a Matt McGlone type out there that's good with the media, and that was old school media. Matt McGlone was constantly on call from News at 10. When a 30-minute news item on national news, Matt McGlone was almost a go-to guy. So it really needs something like that to come out and start pushing things. But the board, all they want to do is whatever we did last year, let's do it again, pat ourselves in the back, and then hopefully we can do it again next year. So the glass is unsurprisingly. I am wishful for it, but reality tells me that the majority of people that go to Celtic matches are quite happy with it. If there's 2 matches coming up, for a lot of people, the game on Sunday is more important than the game tomorrow. We all know that a £40 million boost is as much use as the windfall from Ben Doak, the windfall from Jeremy Frimpong. It's not going to make the slightest difference to the playing squad. So I'll pass over to Boise to see if he's in the optimistic or pessimistic gang. But I'd like to see it being successful, but I just don't see the mechanics for it. Although I quite like the idea of taking a Peter Lill cardboard cutout to the AGM, handing out tea and biscuits to.
Don't give away my secrets too early.
You'll be well paid. You'll be a well-paid cardboard cutout, I tell you that.
And make sure you bring the cheapest biscuits.
I mean, from my point of view, I mean, again, I think when you look at how the club's been there that long, see, once it's got as far as it has, I can't help but feel that there was a hint when did he leave the building, did he not, when Lobel stepped down as chief exec, right? And I get all that stuff. But I also think it was almost tasting the water to how it would be reacted to. See, when Celtic have had an opportunity for fresh voices, Don Mackay came in and lasted 3 months. I think there's a fear because they've been there that long. We don't know any different. You call it about generations. I call it conditioning. I think they've conditioned a huge amount of supporters into thinking domestic bliss is all you can hope for. If you get the odds, winning the Champions League, wow, we've done amazing, right? And I think there's a conditioning that they've tried to do, and a lot of people are maybe waking up and smelling the coffee on that, and that's the positive angle that James is going for. And I can see that more now. I posted in the summer 2022, the biggest backlash I've ever had on X.com, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, in my life. And I just listed the signings: Aaron Moyna free, Bernabe 3.5 million, whoever else it was. There was a couple. I said, if you think,
Sabanovic.
Yes, Joe, yes. And I basically just said, like, if you think that's a window building for success again, keep your eyes on the board. And the backlash at that time I got was everyone, because we're winning on the park, we're deflected. Exactly the board's plan that is, of course. So going, but because everyone's in love with Ange, they've took the heat off us. I was trying to keep people to go, the same frustrations you had 12 months ago, 18 months ago, are the same people. And they've just downsized again this summer right in front of your eyes, even under the much loved Ange. So they're at it still. See, now 3 years on from that, I bet I would never get that sort of backlash for a similar post. Never. Because people are then maybe waking up, right? So the conditioning eventually is going to expire. But here's the problem. With that comes fear. And I think the guys that have been in situ so long are terrified of being exposed. And when they do step aside, or if they stepped aside, I don't think they could handle watching guys making progressive, forward-thinking moves that might be a wee bit two steps forward in terms of their thinking, might be a bit aggressive in terms of expenditure, but might reap even greater rewards. And I think that movie is not one they want to sit back and watch. And I think you've had 2 hints of it. You've had Don Mackay lasting just 3 months, who clearly didn't. Well, this is a bit forward thinking. From whoa, this is not how we do things. You're just here so it looked like we were changing. Dom, just behave yourself. And then let's just play devil's advocate and say it wasn't a game of family fortunes, right? And Mark Lawwell was actually brought in for forward thinking. Let's just say he was. Maybe they didn't even like that. Maybe they didn't like his modern ways of researching players. I tell you what, even your own son can be the fall guy as long as it's not me. And it's dark when you think about that. But all I can think of is 2 generations younger people who have joined that off the field stuff, right? In terms of Don Mackay and Mark Lawwell, and both of them were chased within a year. Don Mackay less than half a year, Mark Lawwell lasted a year. So they're terrified of these new sort of, futuristic modern way of thinking. They don't want the exposure of going, oh God, guys, now we're waking up. How many missed opportunities did we have in your tenure? They don't want their tenure tainted. And I think, not in a bad way, but see, when you've had it all your own ways for so long, they're the ones who are actually conditioned as well. They've conditioned themselves into thinking everything they do, they probably believe is world class. They've blinded themselves to what Celtic can be, to what they can allow Celtic to be. And I do think that is a huge hurdle for them to mentally be able to overcome, would be allowing someone to come in and perhaps do a better job than they did. I think that is something that terrifies them. And I think when the chances of it are pretty high, and they'll know that deep down, they've got to keep digging. Don't back down, double down. I think they've 20 years down, but that's I think that's my sort of overriding feeling about one of the main obstacles they've got in terms of trying to give an opportunity for Celtic to progress would be a personal despair at someone else doing the job they thought they were the only masters of better than them.
But I just made a point there.
I think you're onto something there. I always wondered if perhaps part of the problem wasn't that they disagreed with Mackay's ideas, but they were terrified that Mackay's ideas were too damn good.
Yeah.
And that it would show them up and embarrass them. That one guy could come in and revolutionise things in a way they hadn't managed in a decade or longer. And I think that's definitely part of it. But the fact is, these guys have lost their mandate. The second they start undermining a manager, the second they start actually putting obstacles in the way of the club, growing and developing, they don't have a mandate any longer. We should give them one last chance out of the kindness of our hearts and out of recognition that they've served the club for a long time and that a lot of them have served it well, to present a strategy for moving forward. Beyond that, their time is up. Beyond that, their time is up. This has changed everything. What's happened this summer has changed everything. And I think for a lot of people, it even changed in January when people realised when they sold Kyogo that we didn't take Champions League level football seriously, that we weren't committed to being on that stage. The fact that we didn't replace him gave us virtually no chance. It showed that they didn't believe we had any chance of going through against Bayern Munich. When Rodgers almost embarrassed them righteously on that front. But what they've really misjudged and what they've really misunderstood is 2 basic problems have created for themselves this summer. The first is that this is so obvious, that this has been so obviously a disaster, and that it's put us on the brink of going out the Champions League, that fans are now angry and fans are seeing through the nonsense and recognise that it doesn't have to be like this and shouldn't be like this. And secondly, if they force Rodgers out the door at the end of this season, if Rodgers walks, they don't have a prayer of getting somebody on Rodgers' level to come in and manage this club next time. Because the football managerial community is very small and it's very insular, and they all talk to each other, and non-disclosure agreements will not matter a damn. The next person who's offered the job will pick up the phone and ask Rodgers, what are these people like to work with? And Rodgers will laugh so hard that he will probably have a hernia. And that is why they will not find it. It's not even that they won't find it easy to replace him. They'll find it impossible to replace Rodgers with anybody of any caliber. And so they can go willingly with the applause ringing in their ears and people appreciating the job they've done while we are still on top, or they can wait till it all disintegrates on their watch and have that be their legacy. But that is their future. That is those are their only two futures, because these guys are not going to be able to hold this together. They won't. They have toxified the job. They've made it impossible for the next person to be a high-profile candidate. It just will not happen. We'll end up, and it's not that we'll end up with a Maloney or a Scott Brown or whatever by choice. We might wind up with that by default because there is no other choice and there is no other option. And that's the future they've made, whether they like it or not. When I say everything's changed, I'm not just talking about the mood and the attitude of the fans. They have made their own job virtually impossible after this point. And they can either change course radically, dramatically, or they're going to leave some other way. But it will happen, and it has to happen.
James, I just want to go back on one point that Boise made, where he said maybe we need to be aggressive. I think you said we need to be aggressive in the transfer market, but the last time that we were aggressive in the transfer market, we went to a European final. And directly after we went to that European final, a certain man came into our club. And we have watched very much since that year a steady managed decline. And I think a lot of that goes back to our failure in qualifying for the Champions League. Stripping, you, James, highlighted time out a number of the stripping of Lennon's squad from, the side that beat Barcelona. And it's just constant asset stripping of the squads that have a chance of being anywhere near successful, up to the point where the old Rangers went out of business and we went into 2012. And the reality is now is this board has never had a real challenge since 2012. And when they had one challenge during the COVID season, it came apart at the seams. It was utterly shambolic. You had the whole trip to Dubai disaster. You had Lowell having to come and front up for the disaster after that. You had volleyball and goalie. You had just such a shit show in the COVID season. And when we were, put under pressure by a, let's face it, not great Sevco side, it came apart at the seams, and Peter Lawwell fell in his sword supposedly, but we all know he didn't. But it really showed them up for how unable they are to cope if a challenge comes their way. And we've said time out a number on the podcast that the only thing that will radically alter this is if a serious challenge comes. But the problem is we're now headed into match day 4, where we could pull 9 points ahead of the Ibrox side, and the season could be effectively over because they won't claw back 9 points. If anything, they'll lose more because they'll utterly implode after losing to us, and they'll lose more points and they'll fall further behind us. And the challenge could realistically then come from Hearts or Hibs. And that is just the problem with that is it's letting the board off the hook. Because we don't have a challenge. Yeah, it's their dream. It's their wet dream. We don't have a challenge. And that's bad. It's bad for the game in Scotland. And it's bad for us as a club. We need a challenge from Ibrox. But I wrote an article today and I said the Ibrox side is like, they're like the small kid who decides to take on the big kid in the schoolyard. And the big kid doesn't want to hurt the small kid, and he just puts his hand on his head and the small kid swings away and he hits and he doesn't make any contact. That's what the board do. They keep them at arm's length. But as I said, someday that kid is going to grow up. And someday that kid, the big kid, will regret not putting him in his place while he had the chance. And our board could preside over that happening. I'm reading
some comments here talking about me being deluded. I'm not the deluded one, guys. Listen very carefully what I'm going to say, all you mad skulls out there. We play in Scotland. That straight away, instantaneously, limits the number of managers who will come here. If you are good enough to be offered the Celtic job in a realistic sense, if you're good enough to be offered the Celtic job, you will have other offers. Perhaps not better offers, but better paid offers in more attractive leagues. The only reason you would come here is if you believed that you were getting complete control to take this club to a higher level. And without that, no one credible is going to come here. No one. Once this board of directors has said it doesn't matter even if you're successful, we will undermine you anyway. We will put handcuffs and limits on you anyway. And if you think you're going to do it your way, you're wrong, you're going to do it our way, no one serious is going to want the job. And there's another comment asking if I offer a £3 million contract. If you think Celtic is ever again offering a manager a £3 million contract under this board of directors, you are as crazy as the proverbial shithouse rat. That is not going to happen. Which part of this board is presiding over downsizing are you missing? It's a downsizing in all directions. No chance whatsoever of us getting a top-class manager when Rodgers goes. 0% chance. Zero. We would have to offer the earth, and we won't offer the earth. And we know for a fact that we won't. So who is kidding who? I'm willing to face the reality of where we are rather than where I would like it to be. That's the difference. Russell.
I mean, whilst it's downsizing, this is where it gets really confusing is because the cash reserves that we've obviously, the much lauded 100 million, it could be best run club in Europe, all that nonsense, right? I mean, what is the end game then? And that is really, I think, this what is it, $64,000 question. What is, or the £100 million question? I mean, what is the end game for having these cash reserves if you're downsizing whilst that keeps piling up? I don't know where it ends. I don't understand what the ultimate goal could be, or if this is to be, even when they're long gone, like in 30 years' time, we just to watch that grow to 250 million and have stagnated in Europe still, make the group stage, get, what was it we said, fail 11 out of 18 European qualifiers, but hey, win trebles galore domestically, climb it up to 200 million, get it to 250 million. What's the actual purpose of it? The last time I remember checking, the whole thing about a football club is the product on the park is your cinema experience. If you buy a ticket to go to the cinema, you are going to watch what is on the screen. You go to there and the best paid actors tend to be in the best films. And I'm convinced right now we are prioritizing things that aren't on the screen in terms of maybe it's KPIs, bonuses, right? Who knows? But they seem to be coming before the optimum product on the park. But see, in the midst of that, we expect your expenditure, and your expenditure to go up to watch said product. We expect you to pay more for the shirts again next year. We expect you to pay more for your season ticket next year. We expect you to pay, if like Eric is, to pay more for your Celtic TV subscription next year. So whilst we continually seem to work within inflation in all these regards, we don't seem to see it when it comes to what I was sure a football club is all about, and that was the team in the park being the very best version it can be with the tools at its disposal. I'm sure at one point it used to be referred to as the board are there to support the management and the team to the best of their ability. That is not what happens at Celtic. It's not happened for a long, long time. And I've always found this ironic that Fergus, I can't remember, was booed. Remember when he was raising the flag? Because he was tight. Did he not break the British transfer record for a defender at one point? Alan Stubbs, £4.5 million. Did he not sanction moves for guys from Roma like Enrico Annone, Paolo Di Canio from AC Milan, English Premiership players like Tommy Johnson, whether he was a success or not? And I think of what our cash reserves were then, because if my memory serves me right, we were never in the Champions League in that time. We didn't have as many season tickets. We were sponsored by Umbro, as well as our kits made by Umbro. And yet now, the revenue streams dwarf all that, and we are not spending anything like a fraction of what we are turning over on the playing staff like Fergus was. Yet, the tight one is Fergus, and the one who is lauded as brilliant businessman and the best thing to happen for Celtic in the last 20 years is someone like Peter Lawwell and co. I can't get my head around that.
Yeah, and they spent 5.75 million, or Fergus McCann spent 5.75 million on Eyal Berkovic. So I mean, that was huge money back then. And then obviously we had the money that was spent on the squad that won the treble in 2001.
And what could our cash reserves have been there, Eric? What could they actually have been back then?
I mean, our turnover, I think our turnover was about 60 million quid at that time.
No,
You know?
I'll come in. Turnover was running about 35, 40 million, and they were spending. Berkovic was under Alan McDonald, so Fergus had moved on.
Oh yeah, it was a year after, wasn't it? Yeah.
Berkovic, yeah. So it was in the same ballpark, but slightly different. But there's no Champions League money, no fantastic Adidas deals. But I mean, the Berkovic money and Raphael Scheidt was £10 million down the pan. So it was hasty and it was strange and it was out of context. And
well, the point is we weren't afraid to spend it, Joe.
Yeah. It was incredible to be spending £10 million in 2 transfers when your turnover's about £40 million. So
yeah.
it was pretty wild stuff, but not as wild as the stuff that we're doing now, which is in complete reverse. I see one of the comments saying, "We'll just find another Ange. Good luck with that. Ange has come along once in a lifetime, and let's not forget." Ange's agent, Frank Trimboli, noticed that Celtic had gone 10 days, 20 days, 50 days, 60 days, 70 days without having a manager. So he got on the phone and he forced his way through to Dermot Desmond and eventually get Dermot Desmond to give Ange a call. And once it was agreed with Dermot Desmond, it was a formality. So if that's your strategy, if that's what you're waiting on, it's going to be a long wait. I don't know, well, unless it's Kevin Muscat, but I don't know if there's any Australians in the J League that look to get into British football. Ange was very unique in every single way. He came in on his own and he didn't get a £3 million salary. But if Robert believes that there's a new Ange just around the corner, good luck. And say hello to all the lads over at Career Quick News. It's good to have some of you in with us tonight. Absolute delusions, a lot of you.
Again, the thing here is people fundamentally misunderstanding how much changed this summer. I have seen Celtic managers get denied resources before. I have seen that for 20 years. I have never seen a situation where they are obviously being deliberately stymied and deliberately blocked, where it's a willful act to just pretend that the manager is some kind of paid lackey who just does what he's told and whose own judgment is not to be trusted in any way. This is a guy who's won 2 doubles in a row, who prior to that had won 2 trebles in a row. And Rodgers came back on a certain level of trust that things were different. And what we've shown Rodgers is that things are different. In fact, they are worse. That there seems to be an element of spite involved in this. There seems to be an element of like personal whatever. And that, believe it or not, is what changes everything. You cannot act that way towards an elite level manager, especially one who's been successful, and have people take you seriously and want to come and work for you. It just won't happen. Credible, serious people will not work under a board of directors that has done this to a guy who's been successful. A manager who's been unsuccessful, a manager who's proven that he can't be trusted. You can treat like shit as you like, but you cannot do this to a guy who's won things and a guy who's progressed the club without being a laughingstock. We have a club openly mocking us and unfavourably comparing us to the shambles across the road. I don't know how these people live with the embarrassment of it, but that's who we are. That's how the rest of football sees us now, because of how we've treated this guy. That has changed everything. That has changed the circumstances under which by we can approach and then hire and then retain the next manager. They have absolutely destroyed their credibility and the credibility of this club at the same time. It's a complete disaster. And the scale of it will not become apparent until Rodgers leaves. But these people have massively damaged Celtic's reputation this year. Massively. And that has changed everything. Right, we're 1 hour into this. Do we have time to cover the mess across the street, guys? What do you think?
We can't skip that. Is anybody in a rush?
We'll give it 15 minutes.
Of course we can. My God. Yeah. It really is incredible to me that even as we are roiled by all this kind of internal whatever the hell is going on, and serious pressure is being put on us from inside our own house, that we are that we're going to Ibrox with a chance to go 9 points clear of them after 4 games. I didn't think Russell Martin would be a success. I did not anticipate a disaster on this scale. Eric, they're surely not going to sack a manager a dozen games into his tenure. I mean, if you want to talk about inflicting irreversible reputational damage on your club, that would do it, wouldn't it? At any other club, that would do it.
It would. But, I mean, it just, to me, yesterday, they looked hapless. They really just looked hapless. The players on the pitch didn't seem to know what they were supposed to be doing. So like I texted you guys and said, you know, that I just can't understand how Max Aaron stole a wage in the EPL. You know, because the guy is utter shit. So the question hanging in the balance now is, would they sack him after 4 games? Well, I suppose you've got to look at that from the perspective of if they get a massive tanking in Bruges and then they come back and face us and we humiliate them on their own patch. I think after that you're talking about a mercy killing, you know, because
you might be. There are their fans who are looking ahead to Hibs in the League Cup and on thinking, don't fancy our chances there either. If he goes into the League Cup and he's already miles behind in the SPL, and it's over, isn't it? It's almost incredible to say it, but he's got a noose around his neck already.
He does, and that's why I'm saying it could be a mercy killing, you know, because his position could become untenable. But that then depends on whether the Americans are going to bow to fan pressure. You know what I mean? Are they going to just be the same as the previous board? And
last night, right? And one of the guys on there made a point that I think we raised when we were talking about the takeover initially, being Americans, and they've changed the Articles Association and all that, and whatever their plan is for the club, the Ibrox fans will not be able to interfere with it at all, because these guys are not living 20 minutes up the road, and they need to see the fans in the social club and all that every other night. These guys are 4,000 miles away in gated communities, and if they decide to stand by Martin and give him a season, maybe even 2, to see what he can build, there's really nothing they can do about it, is there? There's really nothing they can do about it.
No. But it's like I said today, they you know, they're going to have to make some sort of decision that, you know, shit or bust after if we hammer them at home, you know, it's going to be like the vitriol from the stands towards the team and towards him is going to be off the scale. And facing into that week in, week out is just going to smash the confidence of the players. I don't know what it's going to do to Russell Martin. And they're not going to be wanting to play. They're not going to play well in that environment. And I made the point today, Michael Gannon wrote an article on Hamza Gamane and the fact that, you know, if it was Walter Smith would have him up against the wall. And I said it was pointless making these sort of comparisons because the club that Walter Smith managed no longer exists. The club that is there now is the version that's there now. And if the Americans want Russell Martin to be in place to bring that version forward, then that's what's going to happen, no matter what the fans do or say. But you've got to look at the balance. Like, is he going to be absolutely hammered, and are they going to just say, look, we can't keep inflicting, you know, that level of pressure on the manager, and the team is obviously suffering as a result of that. But he's lost the dressing room already.
Yeah,
you know,
it looks like.
And I just get the feeling that on Sunday, Daizen Maeda will probably put him in through. We'll probably put him through the middle, and he'll probably, you know, he always rises to those occasions. And they could find themselves 2-0, 3-0 down very early in that game, and it will just turn toxic there if that happens. We don't do walking away; they'll be walking out again after 20 minutes if we start pulverizing them. Now, it could also be an opportunity for Russell Martin to turn things around. There's that side of it too. But will they sack him? I don't know. I mean, they've like in the last few seasons when we've opened up a 9-point gap against them, they've never closed that deficit. I know it's early days, and I know we could get a lot of injuries and we could end up being weak ourselves further into the season. But I don't I don't see them clawing that back. And further, if anything, I see that gap opening further. So I don't know. It's hard to know what way it's going to play out. It's either a case of they're going to stick or twist. They'll stick with him and they'll let him do what he's going to do or what he plans to do. They'll see his plan, or they'll let him try and see his plan out, and that will not be what the Celtic fans want. It will not be what they want, and never the twain shall meet, as they say.
You emailed me after I put the first Banter Years spoof article up about it being a prestige reality TV show. And you said to me, is this going to become a regular thing? And I emailed you back and I was like, no, I don't think so. They'll not give us enough material. I'm on episode 3 already. It's mental.
I know.
It's incredible. I can't believe that it's started like this. And it just gets worse. And it's not even the results and the performances. It's the press conferences after it, which make you want to hide under the table for the guy. Because the more he says, the deeper he digs the hole. I couldn't believe his comments this week. I was absolutely astonished that he thought that he could get away with stuff like, it's not the end of the world and we're moving in the right direction. And when he was asked about whether the 3 games were must-win games, he said no. I mean, you know how that's playing with the audience. We all know how it's playing with the audience. How can he think he can get away with that? And then at the weekend, he turns around and says something about how he doesn't have to answer to the fans, that he only has to answer to his team and to the people above him. I mean, oh my holy God. Russell, what do you think? You must be watching this in absolute hysterics, mate. It's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's baffling. I mean, the only word of caution I probably give myself is Postecoglou had a similar start. I mean, we know what happened
Did he not?
by the end of that.
I remember
3 out of 7 in the league.
The 3 home games. The first 3 home games, the 2 league games and the European game. The one where we beat either Sturm Graz or 20 and we were just phenomenal.
Yeah, right? Gave you hope.
Watching the games, euphoric like this. You could see things were going in the right direction. It was going to turn around. As I said in a piece recently, the home form was so good, you were just waiting for the away form to catch up.
Yeah.
And it was almost a sense of inevitability about it. The only night that kind of rocked the confidence, that didn't even do it that much, was Dundee United at home. I think the 4th or 5th league game, where you were walking it going, oh, that was frustrating. But it wasn't pulling your hair out angry. It was like, oh, we should have won that by about 5 a night. And I never felt like it had disintegrated at any point. It never looked like disintegrating.
Yeah.
They looked like they're disintegrating.
Well, I think the common denominator of that was the core of their team. And I think, I think it'll always be the new additions that will get the blame. He's never a Rangers player, whatever that's meant to mean. I mean, their standards over the last decade since the reincarnation or whatever is nothing to aspire for. So what being a Rangers player actually means is there's nothing right now in terms of like actual achievement. Yet the core that exists, I think, maybe is the negative thing for any manager to try and overcome, yet the one that will remain when the manager departs. And they've all got that same battle. Of course, they want to bring in players of their own ideologies, but they must be the easiest ones to get into your way of thinking and your style and your setup, or your manager's favourite word now, philosophy. I hate that crap. But anyway, like, I think when it comes down to it, they'll be the easier ones and the new ones. It's the guys that are part of the furniture that are the harder ones to change. And yet, there's no way all tenures should have went this bad. There's no way between them all they could be as bad as they are at, as the records show, at management. I think they're rotten at the core, and I think that comes from bad habits, stuck in your ways, sort of. And I think an over expectation from a fan base living in the past. And absolutely. I think that's a tricky one to overcome as well. Everyone keep saying things like, I know all managers, I know this, the support demands success. They demand to win every game. Well, why? I mean, I don't understand. Like last year, there were 7 games they played at home in a row. They didn't get a win in all competition. That's a fact. And that was over 2 managers. That was between Clement and Ferguson. So there's no one should be shocked right now that a guy coming in trying to change it a bit might need time. And I don't know what days it is they're harking back to if they're living in like the modern world, because there are no successful ones other than a COVID season under Gerrard where they had that was a freak year, and they'd still deserve whatever credit they do for overcoming things that we didn't. But
is this who they are now? Is this who they are now? Are they a failed power, or a never were power? If you want to talk about it in the 2012,
they never were a power.
Huh?
They never were a power. I always say that. I mean, we always get this. We always get this rhetoric. You know,
if you look at their whole history comes down to a spell in the 1990s, right? Were they ever a giant club? Were they ever taken seriously at that level? Because Dundee got to a European final and all that as well. So it's all very well saying they won a European trophy and all that. Well, so did Aberdeen, but nobody really ever took Aberdeen seriously as a superpower, as a continental superpower. So there is an argument for asking if they ever were as big a club as they seem to believe they were. But this version certainly isn't. This version doesn't have any history at all of being consistent winners. So at some point, does it dawn on them that this is just who they are? I said last night that if you want a comparable set of accomplishments, Leicester City are a good example. One league in a major national trophy, which was Rodgers, of course, who won their FA Cup. But Leicester did it on a much bigger stage. It just seems to me that they're kidding themselves on about who they are. They're kidding themselves on about what their stature is. And I mean, I went on the forum the other day and I read some of the most unbelievable stuff targeted at Martin. As you say, right, Russell, Martin's got a nearly impossible task in front of him. Right? He had to rebuild not just a dressing room, but an entire culture of defeatism and settling for second best and whatever else it is, right? Impossible task for any manager to complete in a short time. But it's how he's gone about it, which is even stranger and crazier. And again, this has been completely overlooked by the fans. But the three of us on here sat and said it months ago. When you look at their signings, if they had been signed by an Aberdeen or a Hearts or a Hibs, you wouldn't even have given them a second glance. League One players from England were supposed to come up and take our title off us. We're supposed to progress them in Europe and get them into the Champions League group stages. It was fanciful. And they're telling themselves on the forums that the recruitment's been good and that all they need to do is shuffle this guy out the door and bring in somebody else and all the problems are solved. They live in a fantasy world. It's absolutely delusional. Joe, yeah. You're sitting there quietly, patiently smiling, quietly.
Don't worry, Mum. I'm fine. I'm loving it up in Scotland with my new job.
Somebody texted me that last night and said, Stephen McGowan said on the podcast last night, on the Spears podcast, that he's even got his mammy phoning him to see if he's all right. And I thought that was a joke. And then somebody said, no, she texts him that every day. He's talked about it.
And at the same media conference a week past on Friday, which would be before the Alloa match, one of the maintenance guys at Murray Park shouted, "Hull Russell, you're turning a tanker." I think that's what he said. So Russell goes into the media conference and thinks, hey, this is quite a good idea. I think I'll tell the guys. One of the maintenance guys told me I'm turning a tanker. So with the reference to his mum and also turning a tank on the same media conference, after the first league game of the season, he told Sky Sports that the players don't have the right mentality. And then the absolute belter on Sunday, after drawing one each at St Mirren, he's getting a fairly gentle interview with Sky Sports, and he starts blabbing away about Igamani. I mean, that is just utterly bonkers. I think the guy at Sky Sports that half missed it, and then Russell Martin had to come up and say, yes, I told him to come on, and he told me, I've got an injury, I can't go on. And then not only that, but he adds to it that we turned down a bid for him in midweek. You keep these things quiet. So long may it continue. I don't think it will last too much longer, but that's Russell in the media room. On the park, he gets his team playing as dull as dishwater, mini pep football, and they get scalped silly. And then yesterday at St Mirren, they send on every striker available except Igamani, chuck everything into the box, and they get an equaliser from a deflection. So his football is dire. There's a nice interview from him last season at Southampton giving us all the excuses and just how you just need to work hard and the guys will understand, and nothing to do with me, Gov. So the football is ranked rotten. His actions are horrendous. They seem to think that Igaman is a 8, 9, 10 million pound asset. Well, that asset's just been trashed. And another thing, before he came in, the supporters detested him. Now they absolutely can't stand the man. I think he took about 3 steps towards the away support, clapping them yesterday, and did a quick about turn because he knows that he's detested as a person. James, you mentioned that culturally he's the worst fit possible for them. And in terms of results, he's delivering that. So let's hope he's here for a couple of months yet. But it could be short and sweet. And that run of games, Celtic, Hearts, and Hibs, that it's probably a reasonable chance that he's not going to fit. He'll not be in charge for the Hibs match. But I suspect he'll be gone before those 3 matches. Kev Thelwell and Dan Purdy, the recruitment gurus, they'll be getting it tight, and they'll realise. Patrick Stewart gave Phil Clement 2 votes of confidence, then sacked him in the 3rd month. So there's plenty of humour there. Hopefully, we can add to it on Sunday. Absolutely no guarantees. I suspect David Dickinson might be the referee for it. We've not got the best of records there recently, so it's all to be done on our part. And a return trip to Kazakhstan in between times isn't the best, but however bad or however troubling things might be with us, we don't have the manager going into a press conference saying, I had to text my mum to say I'm all right, or the maintenance guy said, Paul Russell, you're turning a tanker.
Okay, Joe, on that note, mate, prediction for tomorrow, prediction for Sunday.
Poof. I'll go for 2-1 for Celtic tomorrow and 1 each at Ibrox on Sunday.
What about you, Eric? What do you think?
2-1 tomorrow, I think. And I'd say I'm going to go for 3-1 on Sunday. We'll give them a bit of a pasting in the first half. Then they'll try and come back in the second and score a goal in the second. But I think they'll be reeling after Bruges. So
yeah,
I think Bruges could give them an absolute pasting, and that'll smash confidence. So I think that's why we'll get them. They'll be reeling when we play them, and I think Rodgers will have the players coached to come out of the blocks hard and fast. And just go for the juggler.
For Ollie, right? Joe, you need to answer this one first, and then you, Eric, before we get to Russell, and you can answer the 2 questions simultaneously. But here's the one that I forgot to ask. Are we going to have any new players in the team by the time we go to Ibrox?
No.
And will they play?
But Balikwisha might be on the bench, and then there'll be some late activity on Sunday and Monday. That'll be presented as some brilliant work. We've seen it last year. The players signed late last year were very good and did make an impact, but I suspect we won't be getting players of the same calibre. And if it doesn't go right in Kazakhstan tomorrow, we may well have seen the last of Dyson or Rio Hatate. So it'll be a similar starting lineup at Ibrox with Balikwisha as a substitute.
What about you, Eric?
Yeah, I believe they'll do, the usual Friday evening thing, give us the good news on a Friday evening of Balikwisha signing. Whether or not we'll get a flurry of last-minute signings in after that, don't see it happening.
Rodgers play him at Ibrox.
Might bring him on late in the game, but Rodgers will have a plan for the game at Ibrox, and I don't think Balikwisha will feature on that. He might see if he can bring him on as an impact sub late in the second half, but he's not going to start him. No way.
What about you, Russell? Predictions first, mate, and do you think there'll be new signings?
I'm worried about tomorrow, I'm not going to lie. Obviously, the record over there, and obviously the away goals thing doesn't factor in. I could see it being I think it'll be extra time could be involved tomorrow, to be honest with you. I'll sway to us getting the job done in extra time. But I don't think in the 90 minutes Celtic will get the job done, to be honest. And as for Sunday, if Balikwisha is in the building, I wouldn't be surprised to see a wild card signing. We were talking earlier about statements that he makes with his lineup. Rodgers at times, I think if he shoehorned straight into the team for Ibrox, it would be also with that undertone of an FU to the board, saying this is what I've been crying out for. Look how willingly ready I am to put in a new signing with minimal prep into the team for our, biggest derby match in our domestic campaigns. So I think that would be an FU to them. So I wouldn't be surprised if we did that. And I think we will. I agree with what Eric said. I think whilst we're making obviously predictions for us, I think that Brugge, as they're now getting called, I always thought it was Bruges. Brugge, everyone's calling it. It's like Atalanta, always been called Bergamo last year. That just confused me. But I think they could be on the wrong side of an absolute doing tomorrow. And that plays then into Sunday. You're crippled with sort of depression from how you're performing. You still want to play this new system, and Daiza Maeda's going to absolutely lap up that space in behind. And we're due a good pumping of them, by the way. Right, we're due a pumping of them.
On Sunday, presumably he'll be playing on the left, right? So does that mean Maeda's through the middle? If he 100%. Plays,
I think he's there to be. I think Maeda's whole prerequisite for wanting to stay on at Celtic is he fancies himself as being the main man up front. But and I don't mind that, by the way. I admire that. You've got to have ambitions and goals, and he kind of proved a point as well when he did do it last year that I can be your main man up there. Yeah. And I don't mind that if we were to get them two first team wingers, Balikwisha and another of that caliber, and then you go Maeda, you just start looking at him, treating him as a striker, and the winger thing is just a backup idea if push comes to shove.
Guys, this has been excellent tonight. Thank you all for coming on, but especially you boys. Thank you, mate. It was great having you on here, and we'll have you on again very soon.
Pleasure, man. Nice to meet you, by the way, as well.
Likewise,
nice to meet you, because I've read, obviously, I'm long in the tooth for reading these blogs and all that. James Forrest and Joe nearly got me the sack from my job about 3 times because every time a manager came over, I was just on one of your blogs reading them. Do you know what I mean? So that wasn't always good. But it's a wee bit mad that from just being like sort of Celtic fan, reading those blogs, to end up doing your own thing and all that, and then it all comes together and we do stuff like this is all cool. And a pleasure to meet yourself as well, Eric.
Boys, I'd love something to get the sack from my blogs. Absolutely love it. As Kevin Keegan might say, I'd love it.
We're definitely close, mate. We're definitely close.
Not you. I didn't have you in mind. Did someone else?
I know, yeah.
On that, I think we'll wrap up. Guys, thank you all for watching as well. And if you would like and subscribe and everything else and spread the word, that would be excellent as well.
Yeah, good 178 on the live show.
And I have a feeling that next Monday will be a very interesting show as well. But until then, guys, take care of yourselves. Enjoy the football. And may the best team, our team, win.
See you next Monday night, guys. And thanks again, Boise. Talk to you then. Bye. Bye-bye.
Cheers.